All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of D&D 5th edition to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, for first things first, if you hear a weird sound in the background, that is my very, very loud heater. Because it is absolutely frigid cold in the frozen north of Wisconsin, where I live. It may turn off halfway through this. I don't know. Predicting when my heater will be on and off is remarkably difficult. It it very rarely follows the actual temperature in my room or the entire stairs that it covers. So, anyway, today we are going back to the Matt Mercer classes that I talked about before. Tasha's Cauldron of Everything releases in, I think, 16 or 15 days now. So very soon we will have more stuff, but until then, I'm going to continue with more Matt Mercer's awesome stuff. I have already covered. I've actually already covered the Blood Hunter class that he released on the DM's Guild. I think twice on this channel. I covered the original one that's actually on the DM's Guild, and then there's an updated version on D&D Beyond. That I covered here too, and then most recently. I covered the new Paladin subclass, the Oath of the Open Sea, I want to say. My memory's really, really bad. It was a sea-based Paladin subclass they created for Ford, and the Way of the Cobalt Soul, the D&D Beyond version, not the one that's in the book that I will be taking stuff from today, the Tal'Dorei Adventures or campaign setting. Sorry. So continuing on this path of cool stuff that Matt Mercer's created, there are actually four subclasses in the Tal'Dorei campaign setting. Again, because this is published by Green Ronin and not Wizards of the Coast, I sincerely doubt we will ever see an official release of these classes on D&D Beyond. But Cobalt Soul Monk is shown up there, so I guess anything's possible. However, D&D Beyond does allow you to create your own custom subclasses, so inputting these stuff for your own personal campaign, if you do use D&D Beyond, shouldn't be remarkably difficult. So, let's dive into this. And I'm actually going to cover, I think, one of the most interesting subclasses in here, which is the Runechild. Runechild is a sorcerer subclass. And very briefly, sorcerers, as we've talked about on here before, unlike wizards who gain their magical power through intense study and mastery of it, very much like any other skill you would learn through books and practice in a controlled environment. Sorcerers are innate spellcasters, meaning they have and it's not to be confused with innate spellcasting as a monster feature. I mean, their ability to cast spells is not due to the fact that they understand intrinsically how magic works, and they do it kind of like chemistry, which is how wizards do it. Sorcerers have something inside of them that just gives them the ability to tap into magical energy. And that thing is called their sorceress origin, and that's what the subclasses are. Sometimes, like Draconic Origin, they actually have dragon blood, which is innately magical. Storm sorcerers were born near a giant magical storm, or somehow when they were born, they were kind of like affected with storm magic. The Runechild is interesting because instead of just having an aspect of their being that gives them access to magic, rune children are effectively arcane focuses almost. Their body itself is actually arcane, not like their blood as in draconic, or they have a little spark of magic in them. Their actual physical body is a magical conduit, and that gives them the ability to kind of channel magic through their body using essence runes is what they're called. And it's a really interesting to take. Now, to really quickly go over how class design works in 5th edition, every class should play very, very differently. We've talked about this a lot. Sorcerers themselves, the thing that makes them very, very different is they are full casters, so they get just as many spells as wizards do, which is different from earlier editions where they would get less spells, but they would have them all memorized. So they get the same amount of spell slots. However, they learn spells instead of copying them to a spell book. So any spell they have, they can just use instead of having to prepare spells every morning. The other thing that defines the sorcerer is what's called sorcery points. Sorcery points, you have as many sorcery points as you have levels in sorcerer, and you can use them for a lot of different things. The most basic thing you can use sorcery points for is you can change sorcery points into spell slots, and you can change spell slots into sorcery points, I believe using a bonus action. And then when you get a little bit higher, you get what's called meta magic. Meta magic allows you to, while you're casting the spell, change it somehow using your sorcery points, which is really kind of the defining aspect of sorcerers, because they innately have the ability to cast spells. And they don't like study and everything like that. As they're casting it, they like to kind of modify the spells depending on the situation. So you can do things like Quicken Spell, where you can cast the spell as a bonus action instead of an action, or Twin Spell, where you can make the spell cast twice under certain circumstances. Things like that. Yeah, those are the kind of defining features of the sorcerer, and those are the things that somehow should factor into the Runechild. So let's jump into the actual features themselves. At first level, you actually get to two different things. The first thing you get is essence runes. Now, essence runes, you have as many essence runes as you have sorcery points, which is a little bit against 5th edition design, in the idea that 5th edition is designed to be as simple as possible, and adding essence runes gives you another pretty hefty resource that you have to track, simply because you will get a lot of them. A level to 20 sorcerer will have 20 essence runes and to 20 sorcery points, and they're used very differently. So that would be my only kind of gripe about this, is it's adding an additional resource, which tends to be kind of against the idea of 5th edition. However, how they use them is actually really interesting. Effectively, the runes appear somewhere on your body. They are physical runes, and they're invisible when they are what's called an inert. So without one of these runes being active, you don't have to worry about it. However, at the end of a turn, when you spent any number of sorcery points for any of your class features, an equal number of essence runes glow with stored energy, becoming charged runes. If you expend a charged rune to use one of your Runechild features, it returns to being an inert essence rune. And then, in addition to that, as a bonus action, you can just burn any number of sorcery points to convert an equal number of essence runes into charged runes. And if you have no sorcery points and no charged runes, you can use an action to convert one rune into a charged rune. If you have 5 or more charged runes, you actually emit bright light in a 5-foot radius. You actually glow, and any charged runes revert to inert essence runes after you complete a long rest. So, to unpack all of that, anytime you use this as a sorcery point, you turn on a charged rune. If you want a charged rune and you don't have one, you can just burn sorcery points to activate or to charge runes. Now, that specific aspect of the essence runes kind of fights against the idea of this as a sorcerer, since you are significantly more valuable, or the sorcery points is significantly more valuable to sculpt spells or create spell slots, both of which will actually give you runes in addition to burning the sorcery points, which would give you your essence runes. So I would probably say that's the only thing that, unless you have a very specific instance where you need to have your essence runes, I can't really, or charged runes, I can't really see anyone using them. They stay charged until you use them, or you take a long rest. You don't have to worry about them expiring anytime soon. Again, because sorcerers can transform spell slots into sorcery points, and then anytime they use sorcery points, they get charged runes. There's a good chance that you will very rarely ever be without charged runes. And if you do get to the point where you have no sorcery points and no charged runes, you can just burn an action outside of combat or in combat if you need to get a charged rune back. Yeah, this is going to be the other thing that you're doing a lot of, and it does kind of fit really well with the idea of this as a sorcerer, because this incentivizes you using your sorcery points really as often as possible, because they don't decay over to the time or anything like that. The Runechild as a sorcerer is actually encouraged to convert spell slots, where a lot of other sorcerers will conserve their spell slots, just or their sorcery points, so they can use them for meta magic, which is extremely common. So this really incentivizes you to just be constantly using your sorcery points, so you can also use your essence runes. Now, what can you do with the essence runes other than become a nightlight? Well, the other thing you get at first level is what's called Glyphs of Aegis. Excuse me. I'm recording this right after I woke up, so my voice is not warm at all yet. I meant to record this last night, and I didn't get a chance to. All right, so Glyphs of Aegis. Effectively, whenever you take damage from an attack, hazard, or a spell, which is really any way you can take damage, You can use a reaction to expend any number of charged runes, rolling a d6 per charged rune, and then you subtract the total roll from the damage inflicted by the attack hazard or spell. So right there, this can be super, super useful because the Runechild now has a major defensive advantage. If we think back to the Blade Singer, the Blade Singer had this ability at level 10 where they could expend spell slots to reduce damage. And for spellcasters in 5th edition, reducing damage is a really, really big deal. Because anytime you take damage, you have to make concentration checks if you have a concentration spell. And the DC is either to 10 or half the damage you took in the attack, rounded down. So whichever one is higher. So if you're taking more than to 20 damage in a single hit, if you take 26 damage, your DC is just turned to a 13. If you take 40 damage, your DC is just turned to a 20, which can mean that you're going to be losing your spell just because of a really big attack. With Glyphs of Aegis, you can reduce that, effectively controlling the DC you have to roll. In addition to that, a really common tactic for a lot of monsters, if they are fighting a spellcaster, is they will use their multi-attack feature to just get you to keep rolling concentration checks. Because even at the DC 10, you will fail eventually. With Glyph of Aegis, you can just prevent yourself from taking small amounts of damage completely. Things like Magic Missile is a really, really good way to force a spellcaster to lose concentration, because at first level, it's 3 missiles that automatically hit, that can do up to 5 points of damage, which isn't a lot, but that's 3 concentration checks. You cast it at higher and higher levels, you just keep adding more concentration checks. With Glyph of Aegis, you can just prevent that from happening and not have to worry about using something like a shield spell, which effectively makes you immune to magic missiles. So the other thing you can do with Glyphs of Aegis at 6th level, you can use an action to expend a charged rune, temporarily transferring a Glyph of Aegis to a creature you to touch. They can only hold a single glyph. It lasts for an hour, or until the creature is damaged by an attack hazard or spell. The next time that creature takes damage of any of these sources, roll a d6 and subtract the roll from the damage roll. Then the glyph is used. So, this effectively means you can give it to 2 other players, but only one, which really isn't that useful. Even if you roll max on your d6, removing a single d6 from damage from another player doesn't really do much. Again, the nice thing about Glyphs of Aegis is you can choose whether or not you want to use them, whereas transferring it to another person, just the next time they take damage is going to be a little bit less. Now, if you could combine this with resistance, like a barbarian, that effectively doubles how much damage it can reduce. Because, again, it says when you take damage, and when you take damage when you have resistance, you half the damage before you deal with any of the other effects. So, effectively, subtracting a d6 from something that, like a barbarian when they're raging's damage, is effectively like subtracting a d12, which is still not a massive amount, especially for a barbarian who get tons of hit points anyway. So that aspect of it, I just don't see being very useful. The first one, however, anything that removes damage is useful. And because all it takes is a reaction, Meaning if someone did hit you with magic missiles, you could only get rid of one of the magic missiles. But because it only takes a reaction, it still means you can use it a lot. And using it for powerful attacks to keep you alive is going to be really, really useful. So, at 6th level, you get what's called, and I'm going to mispronounce this simply because I don't like the way this is quote-unquote this is supposed to be pronounced. Sigilic Augmentation. I think it's supposed to be Sigilic Augmentation because it's supposed to be sigil, and I just hate that word. It just doesn't sound right to me. So, upon reaching 6th level, you can channel your runes into temporarily bolstering your physical abilities. You can expend a charged rune as a bonus action to enhance either your strength, dexterity, or constitution, granting you advantage on ability checks with a chosen ability score to the start of your next turn. And you can choose to maintain this benefit additional rounds by expending a charged rune at the start of each of your following turns. So this one is slightly confusing due to the fact that there are no constitution ability checks. Constitution is unique in that the only thing you use Constitution for when you're rolling is a Constitution saving throw, which it doesn't actually say you can use these for. It's just ability checks. So that in itself is a little bit weird, but it's something that a lot of people don't realize when they think about Constitution checks. Most people think about taking poison and stuff like that. All of it is saves. There are no Constitution ability checks. However, strength and dexterity, that is pretty useful, especially since most sorcerers are going to lowball. Most of them are going to lowball strength. Because you don't use it for anything in your sorcerer kit, whereas dexterity is still really useful for things like dex saves and your armor class. So, but both of these are really, really useful, and there's tons of things that you use strength checks and dexterity checks for. Acrobatics is really, really common in a lot of different places. Strength checks are really common as well, especially if you're climbing, which is something that happens with a lot of parties. Being able to just give yourself advantage on those checks, or another thing that's really, really common is stealth checks for dexterity. You always have that one player that's just not very good at stealth. Well, this is going to ensure that your Runechild is not that player. Really, really useful ability to just give you other ways to use your essence runes and your charged runes with a lot of benefit. Like I said, the only thing in there is that the Constitution is completely worthless because there are no Constitution checks in the D&D, only saving throws. The other thing you get at 6th level is what's called Manifest Inscriptions. As an action, you can suspend a charged rune to cause any hidden magical marks, runes, wards, or glyphs within 15 feet of you to reveal themselves with a glow for one round. This glow is considered a dim light for a 5-foot radius around the mark or glyph. This, in itself, is really going to be dependent on your dungeon masters as far as how useful it is. Because effectively, this reveals... wow, I just got something in my throat, and it's annoying the heck out of me. All right, much better. This effectively reveals basically magical traps which is a nice, especially since you don't have to burn a spell slot for this. It's remarkably limited at only 15 feet. I would much rather see this as like a 30-foot area, simply because revealing magical marks doesn't have a ton of super useful uses. Like I said, it's basically a detect magical to traps, which there is a detect traps as a spell, which can be useful when you're dungeon delving. But I know a lot of the DMs tend to focus a little bit more on mechanical traps than magical, which I think is a disservice to players, because magical traps can be a heck of a lot more fun. And if you have that, high intelligence rogue or wizard that goes around finding all the traps and then sending your rogue off to disarm them using investigation, magical traps can be super fun, simply because they don't look like regular traps, and so it can be really easy to just say, oh, you didn't to have the DC be higher to find a rune of warding or something like that than for a pressure plate or something, because if they're like, I scan for traps, well, traps are defined as mechanical in this. So yeah, I think that could be super useful in certain abilities. The other thing, hidden magical marks can be more like plot device kind of things, where perhaps there's an underground thieves guild or wizards guild or something like that, where they use magical runes to mark their territory or something like that, like maybe like the Arcane Brotherhood in Icewind Dale. That could be useful. This, but other than that, that particular aspect of this is pretty limited, which is why it's nice that at 6th level you get both this and Sigilic Augmentation, because you're going to be using Sigilic Augmentation a lot more than Manifest in Inscriptions. So at 14th level, you get Runic Torrent, which is really where the Runechild starts to shine. Whenever you cast a spell, you could expend a number of charged runes equal to the spell's level to allow it to ignore any resistance or immunity to the spell's damage type the target may have. This is kind of big. Now, to clarify some stuff there, because you have to use enough to charged runes or charge runes equal to the spell's levels, that effectively means you can't use this for cantrips, which is fine, because sorcerers are going to have enough cantrips that they can move around with the damage types. However, the ability to cast like Meteor Storm on a red dragon and their whelps, or the ability to cast like Finger of Death on a necromancer or something like that, like that's a really big deal. And the ability to get around the damage resistance and the damage immunity makes the Runechild an incredibly effective spellcaster in a number of situations. It also allows your sorcerer to specialize in the damage type to take advantage of like the elemental adapt feat. So if you wanted to be a flame sorcerer, one of the issues with that is you're eventually going to come up against monsters that are either resistant or immune to fire damage. Well, with this, you're not. Now, it's a 14th level ability, So you have to play most of your campaign without this. But once you get it, you can be highly effective in doing just crazy awesome stuff. So yeah, I really like that. I would have liked to see it show up a little earlier, but just because how the Sorcerer's Origins works, this is their first subclass of ability above level to the 10, which is where most of the more powerful abilities become, simply because for multi-classing, any ability you get at level 11 or above, you can't mix with another level 11 ability because the level max is to 20. So that's why anything above our 10th level, basically 11th level or higher, tend to be a lot more powerful abilities because they don't have to worry about multi-classing and min-maxers building kind of broken characters with multiple abilities. So yeah, I really like that. I would have liked to see it a little earlier, but you know, that's how Origins works. Finally, at 18th level, you get Arcane Exemplar form, which I love. It's super cool. Effectively, you can use a bonus action and expend 6 or more charged runes, which this would be a reason why I could see someone burning sorcery points just to get charged runes. Maybe even just creating a couple spell slots so they can get their charged runes or whatever. But the new form lasts for 3 rounds plus 1 round for each charged rune expended over 6. So this is a massive dump for your charged runes. Which I like because, again, good class design gives you choices, but it doesn't give you a right and a wrong choice in every single situation. If one choice is obviously this is a superior thing every single time, excuse me, then they're not giving you a choice as much as they're giving you an upgrade that has a limited number of uses, which isn't as much fun. It basically means you're not using the lower ability. This, because it's very limited, it only lasts for the 3 rounds, plus more if you burn more slots. And I'll go to the end here just to say, once it ends, you can't. You can only use this, or you have to use a long rest before you can use the feature again. This is something like, okay, do I want to spend it here because I'm not going to be able to use it again for the rest of the day? And there's other downsides to do it, but yeah, I really like this. So what does the Arcane form do? Well, I'm glad you asked me. You have a flying speed of 40 feet. Flying casters are super cool and super dangerous. Because one of the most common ways to deal with casters is to just send all your bad guys to kill them. And if they're in the air and your bad guys can't fly, they're significantly harder to kill. So, yes, flying speed always nice. Your spell save DC is increased by 2. That is massive. Spell save DC is super important. So sorcerers are charisma-based spellcasters. If you don't have a 20 in your charisma score by the time you hit level 12, you have probably built your character poorly. Most players will have a 20 in their charisma by level 8, just because it means you have the highest spell save you possibly can. Which at 18th level, which will give you a plus 6 to your proficiency bonus, that's effectively a 19 without using any magic items to increase it. This turns it into a 21 without using any magic items to increase it, which is a really big deal, especially when you can remove any resistances or immunities to your damage. So if you wanted to use a different damage type simply because it uses a different save, like a creature that's super high in dexterity, but is immune to poison, like a monk. Well, most poison spells use con saves. So the ability to remove that resistance and immunity means you can target the stat that's not as high. So super cool, and then it's super high as well. You have resistance to damage from spells, another super useful thing, because that's the other way that you take down flying casters. So you just shoot them full of magic. Well, not so much with the Runechild. And then when you cast a spell of a first level or higher, you regain hit points equal to the spell's level. You've just become an arcane battery of badassness for at least the 3 turns. Obviously, this incentivizes using spells with spell saves instead of attack rolls, because of the DC increase. But that's like a massive number of spells. As you get to higher levels, there's significantly less spells with attack rolls, simply because spells with attack rolls in general, if you miss, you waste this as a spell slot. With saves, the vast majority, like I'm relatively certain it's above like 95%. I'm actually not sure if there are spells that don't do half damage on a save, but whatever. It means that even if creatures save out of it, you're not wasting this as a spell for the most part. Yeah, that's really useful. The ability to fly is super useful. Resistance to damage from spells is useful. Combine that with your Glyphs of Aegis. You are kind of unkillable. And then every time you cast a spell, you're getting hit points back. So anything your Aegis runes don't save you from, you're getting back anyway through hit points. And if you're modifying your spells using sorcery points as you're casting them, you're just a super powerful caster for this limited time. Now, I mentioned you can only use it once per long rest. There's another limiting factor. When it ends, you can't move or take actions until after you're in the next turn. Effectively, the same effect you would have if a haste spell ended on you, you lose a turn. So another thing that makes this very situational, the idea where you have to really go, okay, is it worth just becoming a lot more powerful and resistant at the same time, if in 5 turns I'm going to lose a turn? Now, most combat in 5th edition, even like final boss battles, doesn't go much longer than maybe between 6 and to 10 rounds. I think in the years that I've been playing D&D, even going back to 4th edition, I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen combat go beyond to 10 rounds. In my own games or watching things like a Critical Role and stuff like that. It just doesn't happen. So there's a very good chance that you're not going to have to worry too much about it if you burn enough. Runes, but it's still something you need to worry about. And because this is such an explosive, like super powerful thing, you're probably going to be using it on big baddies and stuff like that. So, yeah, I like the fact that it does give you enough limitations on it that it is a choice and not, every time we go up against a baddie, I always just pop this for first round or something. Yeah. So, for final thoughts on the Runechild. It's a really interesting subclass. I as much as it does add a little complexity to the sorcerer, I really like the essence runes. I like that they have their own uh, um, resource that they get to use to let them do even more cool things. The defensive aspects of the Runechild, like Glyph of Aegis, um, and stuff like that, really makes it uh, pretty easy to make a kind of melee spellcaster in a Runechild, where you can use things like Shadow Blade or touch basis spells and things like that, and really create kind of a cool, battle uh, um, wizard, to the point where I could even or battle sorcerer, where I could even see you taking some feats that give you um, armor proficiency to allow yours as a sorcerer to actually wear some heavier armor, especially if you were to take like the human variant, where you get a feat right at level 1, and you were to take the light armor proficiency. uh, you could really turn this into a cool kind of spellblade kind of class, because they could go in to combat, use cantrips like Green Flame Blade, or those Blade Singer cantrips we talked about, and then for their actual spell slots, they could use touch-based spells and the things like that to do some really cool stuff, and not really have to worry that much about taking the damage, because they can Aegis themselves and reduce the damage. Um, so yeah, it's really interesting. The one thing I don't like about it is, other than the defensive aspects, um, the runes themselves just don't have as many uses as I like. Um, yeah, most of the uses for the runes are extremely, um, it's just extremely, they're only useful, situational. That's the word I was looking for. Things like the Runic Torrent, which is a super useful way to remove resistance and immunity, which is great if you're dealing with creatures that are resistant to a certain spell type. And I really like it, but there's going to be a lot of combat where your only use for your essence runes is going to be your Aegis. And like I mentioned before, when you can transfer a rune to someone else, because you're limited to only one, that's almost never going to be a deciding factor in any thing. Like it's just not really going to save someone. If I were to modify this, I would take away that aspect that allows you to only transfer one. Simply because just a single d6 isn't going to do much. However, being able to give 2 or 3 to a like a wizard ally, or maybe a caster druid, or a bard maybe that doesn't have a great armor class, could be really useful. Beyond that, like I said, I like the Runechild. I think it might be a little bit underpowered compared to a couple of the other sorcerers subclasses that are officially published. Simply because, again, the most you're going to be using your runes for is going to be keeping yourself protected, which is great, but that's not something you generally see sorcerers using a lot for. So again, it'll let you play a unique version of a sorcerer, but yeah, it's interesting. I would like to see maybe some slight modifications, like that removal of the limit on transferring a Glyph of Aegis to someone else. But beyond that, combining it with the already super powerful aspects of being a sorcerer, yeah, it's super cool. Yeah. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of these videos. And if you really enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button. I try to put out at least 2 videos a week. With Tasha's launching in just a couple weeks here, I will probably be putting out more content specifically focused on Tasha's. So definitely check that out. Share the video in the comments below. Let me know what sorcerer spells you think would be most useful to be able to remove resistance or immunity against their damage type. I'm interested to see what spells could come to mind for you guys. As far as, well, I love using this as a spell, but when I run into, you know, these monsters, I can't use it. Or maybe just a specific monster type that you would love to use this particular spell on, but they're resistant or they're immune to the damage. Put that all in the comments down below. Otherwise, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time, all right? Bye-bye!